Most of you are probably familiar with the nursery rhyme Humpty Dumpty. You know Humpty Dumpty? This guy right here. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. If you know it, you can say it with me. Humpty Dumpty had a great, all the king's horses and couldn't put Humpty together again. Right. That's a great little nursery rhyme, right? For those of you that don't know, that's not in the Bible. It's in some book somewhere, a kid's book or something, but occasionally I'll memorize something that's not in the Bible. But that's a cute little nursery rhyme. If you're 4 or 5 years old, it's cute until you're Humpty Dumpty, right? Or until someone you love is Humpty Dumpty. Or until the doctor says to you, I can't put you back together again. Or all the money that you have, it's not sufficient to put you back together again. Or all your friends, no matter how much they love you or care about you, they can't put you back together again. An event like that in your life is what we call a broken world experience. You married 30 years, and all of a sudden, just out of the blue one day, she tells you she doesn't love you anymore. He's a good Christian. He's been a great father, but you find out he's been visiting porn sites over the last several months. These things happen, don't they? Does that ever happen to you? Do you know what that's like, to have a broken world experience? Most of you do. It's cancer. It's a rebellious child. It's a betrayal of a very close friend. It's being downsized after 25 years of being a great employee. You see, everybody has broken world experiences, and if you haven't had one yet, you need to tighten your chin strap because it'll happen. It's coming. It'll be there before you realize it. You know, a lot of people have this mindset, and maybe you're this way, that the world is fair. You know, you hear those karma and everything balances out. It's all fair. But the truth is, you have a flawed theology. That is not, and you are setting yourself up for a very rude awakening if you believe that the world is fair. Because we live in a broken, fallen world where bad things happen to bad people. And tragically, bad things happen to good people as well. And that's why we're doing this series called Restore Your Broken World, because we want you to know that Jesus does restore broken worlds. He does. So as we launch into this study, I want us to look at 3 observations. I think these give us some perspective about the broken world experience. They give us some reality of it, what to expect. And the first observation is trials are inevitable. Trials are inevitable. You would think about it, bad things are not just a possibility in our lives. Bad things are a reality. Look what the Bible says about this, okay? Dear friends, Peter writes, dear friends, do not be surprised at the painful trial that you're suffering as though something strange were happening to you. Peter says, don't be surprised when this happens. In fact, I get the sense he's saying, plan on it, because it's coming. Listen to what Jesus says in John 16. He says, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. And then listen, he gives them the expectation. In this world you will have trouble. But take heart, I have overcome the world. Jesus says the same thing. You're going to have problems. You're going to have broken world experiences in this world. And then Paul says to Timothy, the young man he was mentoring, he says, in fact, everyone who wants to live a godly life in Christ Jesus will be persecuted. It's pretty direct. He's trying to prepare Timothy for the journey ahead, but we're drafting off of that as we read that. And all of these passages might be very discouraging to some in here, but I think it's enlightening because it tells us what we should expect, that trials are inevitable. Now, there's a second observation, and that's the observation that trials will either make you or they will break you. They will make you or they will break you. Trials are like a double-edged sword. They make some people, but they break others. You know, some of the most influential people in life, people who've made some of the most significant contributions in our world, are people who went through horrendous times. People who were in concentration camps like Corrie ten Boom. People who went through terrible, debilitating accidents like Johnny Erickson Tata. These were people who, like a piece of spiritual coal, they were under pressure, under incredible hardship. And they held on. And they came out like a diamond, reflecting the character and the nature of Jesus. But not everybody comes out a diamond. Some of you have probably met that lady who 30 years ago went through a divorce, and she's as bitter today as she was 30 years ago. In fact, her soul is soured because of the bitterness. Was it fair? No. Did she get a raw deal? Absolutely. But the way that she's handled this, her attitude toward this, has made her the most unbearable person to be around. You see, trials will either make you or they will break you. It brings us to our third observation. Third observation. Victims fail to move beyond asking why and remain stuck in their pain. You've all met someone who's a victim. In fact, maybe you've been a victim at one point or another, but you've met these people. You've been in a Bible study, or you've been in a class, or maybe went to a conference or a life group or something, and you met them. Hi, Mary, how are you doing? Pretty good, considering. And you say, considering what? And then it's as if she pushes the play button on the DVD player, right? Because she launches into this epic story of her life, of how she was taken advantage of and how she was mistreated or abused or whatever. And it was all real, but she's been telling this story to every person who will listen to it for the last 15 years. And you realize that, well, Mary sees herself as a victim. She sees herself as a victim. We've all met people like Mary. Victims have a very difficult time moving beyond the question, why me? Why did this happen to me? Why did I marry him? Why did I go to the office at that point? That moment, why was I there? Why was I in that intersection at that moment driving my car? Why did this happen? Why did that happen? Why? Now, here's the truth. Emotionally, when we first experience a broken world experience, we ask the question why. That's normal. But to stay there isn't. People who are survivors or spiritual conquerors, they ask why initially, but then they move on to ask the question, what? What is it, God, that you're doing? What is it that you want me to learn in this moment? What is it that you want me to do so that later on when I encounter somebody who's going through the very same thing I'm going through, that I can help them through this? What is it, God? What is it? You see, if we ask the question why on the front end of our broken world experience, that's normal. But to stay there isn't. In fact, if you stay there, it's lethal. It'll shrivel up your soul. I wonder if you've ever had one of those conversations with God where you just wanted to know, how am I supposed to handle this? How am I supposed to make it through this? Maybe you ask him, God, what would you like to say to me? I'm in the midst of this horrible, difficult struggle. What is it that you want me to know that would help me to be more like Jesus and help me to fulfill your purposes? I know you're not surprised by any of this, God. Your Bible says that you're all-knowing and that you have all wisdom. And so I'm fully expecting, anticipating that you have the very best for me that will come out of this. I just wondered what it was, God. You see, one of maybe the difficult things for us to grasp is the fact that God either decreed this situation that you're experiencing or he allowed it. Whatever the case is, when I'm in a broken world experience, I'm the object of his love. So I want to know, what should I do? What should I say? What should I think? So that I can cooperate with God's work in my life. I want to learn it. I want to move forward. Well, James wrote a book. It's in the New Testament. If you're not familiar with where it is, if you want to look there, we're going to look at James, the first chapter. But James, the first chapter, go to James, go to Revelation, it's the last book. Go, come forward a few books and you'll run into James. James was writing a letter to believers who were struggling. They were really struggling. They were struggling financially. They were struggling in their families. They were struggling as a result of persecution. They were struggling with their health. These people's worlds were falling apart. And, in some ways, it's very similar to some of the struggles that you all are going through. We don't have to guess what God would say, because James actually wrote it to these friends of his who were part of the church in Jerusalem. In James 1:1, James gives us kind of the greeting. He says, James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes scattered among the nations. Greetings. James is the leader of the church in Jerusalem. And he writes to these brothers and sisters of his because they're part of his family, spiritually speaking. They're people who he cares about. These are people who he loves deeply. And their networks are breaking down. Their families are falling apart. Their health is being compromised. And so James writes to them. He writes to them what you would say to people who are going through a broken world experience. Look what he says. He starts off with a command. He says, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces endurance, perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. James says, consider it pure joy. He didn't say, oh, I'm sorry that this happened to you. I mean, this is a terrible, terrible thing. In fact, I was so proud of you when you took that step of faith and you believed that Jesus was the Messiah. And then this happened. Why don't you just come over to the house and commiserate? You can cry on my shoulder. I'm here for you. That's not what he said. He said, consider it pure joy. My brothers and sisters, when you encounter various trials, consider it pure joy. I taught a Bible study, my very first Bible study I ever taught. I taught out of the book of James, and I taught, the second lesson was on verse 2, chapter 1. And honestly, at the time, I thought, this is crazy. I mean, who's going to go, hey, joy, life's going down the tubes, but woo, and that's not what we're talking about. But I really struggle with it. I hope that if you're finding this doesn't really add up, it's okay. Hang with me, because I think there is some merit to what James is saying. I think there's deep, deep value in this. But it's not obvious when you first read it. In fact, you can read that, consider it pure joy, and go, I don't think he's normal. That's not right. The truth is, James tells us why we should consider joy. Why we should consider all of this joy when we face trials. He said, because, in verse 3, you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Some of you may have the word endurance there in your translation. It produces strength in us. So we should allow this perseverance to do its work in us in such a way that God ends up doing in us and through us the work that he wants to do. These three observations, they give us perspective about these broken world experiences. They give us the reality of it. Well, there are three questions that survivors and spiritual conquerors always ask when they face a broken world experience, because they want to respond in a way that's going to be healthy and also be holy. They want to be the best that they can be in the moment for the kingdom of God, but they also want to be healthy about it. And so I want us to take a few moments this morning and look at these three questions. The first question is this: what can I control when my world falls apart? What can I control when my world falls apart? What is it that you can actually control when you have a broken world experience? And it's simple. Your attitude. Your attitude. You can control your attitude. You can control how you respond to something. Now, the word that Paul uses there, consider, in verse 2, it's not an emotional word. It's an accounting term. It means to evaluate or to calculate. It's like an accountant sitting down, going over the books, looking over everything, and he's analyzing it, and he's calculating the end result. And what James is saying here is this. Take that logical approach to this thing and look at it. And when you examine it and you understand, what you're going to find is that considering everything pure joy really is the best way to go. That's what James is saying. That's what the text is telling us from the original language. It's the best approach. It's the best response. Now, it's not the easiest. That's not what I said. It is going to be a bit of a challenge, maybe for all of us at some point, but it is the best approach. There's a great quote by a fellow by the name of Viktor Frankl. Some of you may know him. He was in a Nazi war camp during World War II. After the war was over, he went on to become a psychiatrist, and he wrote out of his own experiences, and this is what he wrote. He said, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." You know, the truth is, I can't control the stock market. I can't control how my kids are going to turn out or decisions that they make. I can't control, who's driving and how they're driving on the interstate. You can't control what your boss does. But when we look at life as a whole, you measure it all out, there's about 99% of what happens to me I can't control. But 100% of how I respond is under my control. I can choose how I'm going to respond in every single situation. Here's the deal. You are not a victim unless you choose to be. Now, I'm not saying that somebody can't victimize you and in that moment you're a victim, but you do have the choice at that point to stay there or choose to move forward. You don't have to be a victim. Only victims in this world are people who choose to stay victims and who choose to get some unhealthy attention from people by telling people that, hey, I got a lousy deal. It was a raw deal. I was mistreated. I was abused. I went through miserable, painful experience. And in kind of a twisted way, what they're actually communicating is, I want your attention. I don't want to grow. I don't want to face hard things. I don't want to mature. But I desperately want your attention because when you show me your attention, I feel good in that moment. But they choose to stay a victim. Now, should we empathize and comfort and care for people who are facing a broken world experience? Absolutely. But what I'm saying to us, when we go into that, however difficult it might be, decide that you're not going to stay there, that you will decide not to be a victim long term. Now, at the end of verse 2, James says this. He says, whenever you face trials of many kinds. Now, whenever, because that kind of implies that it's coming, right? Whenever you face trials of many kinds. And the word trials there, it's an interesting word because he's painting this picture that you're surrounded by trials, okay? And the word trials that he uses there means you learned it through experience. Someone didn't teach it to you. You learned it through actual experience. External things came into your life that you can't control. Those things came, and you respond when the circumstances happen. How are you going to do that? How are you going to respond? Well, James says, respond by working on the things you can control. Focus on your attitude. He says in verse 2 again, consider it pure joy. I want you to listen to this. This goes back to that Bible study I was talking about. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds. I'm just going to be honest, that's hard. I mean, I'm not throwing it out there going, okay, God bless, see you at Kroger or see you at the Applebee's, you know. What I'm saying is, I know this is hard. In fact, if you think about it, that's not how I'm wired up, and it's not how you're wired up. We're wired up to wilt. We're wired up to backpedal. We're wired up to fall down. That's how, when it's really, really bad, we want to quit. We want to give up. But what James is saying is, consider it pure joy. So the response is one that's going to be supernatural. I mean, if we're going to do that, if we're going to actually consider it pure joy, God's going to have to, he's going to have to do something in us to give us the strength and capacity in order to do that. One of the things that's important for us to recognize is that when we consider pure joy, when we respond that way, that's a choice. It's not a feeling. You know, feelings are very bad compasses. Have you ever noticed that? I mean, honestly, if it were up to me, I would eat every donut I come in contact with. That was, that was available to me, all right? I would. But it's a bad choice. Now, but I feel it. I just have that connection with manna. It's like 21st century manna, right? I love donuts. I love them. But they're not good for me in that excess. Feelings are like cabooses on the train. The choices we make are more like the locomotives or the engines. Don't be surprised if you make a decision and your feelings don't line up, right away with that decision you make, that your emotions kind of lag behind. They'll catch up eventually. They'll catch up eventually. Sometimes you've got to choose your way out of your discouragement. Sometimes you can actually take steps to move beyond even depression. Several years ago, I found myself at the bottom of a very dark hole. Hardest thing in my life, I couldn't explain it. I was hurting. I couldn't understand it. I'm married to a very patient and loving wife. But I finally went to see a friend of mine who's a counselor, and he gave me a little assessment, and he said, "You're depressed." And I went, "Oh, great. I'm paying $250 an hour for you to tell me what I already knew." My heart was I was just hurting on the inside. Physically, it almost felt like I was physically hurting. And he said, you're actually, his exact diagnosis was you're moderately depressed. I said, moderately depressed? You mean it's worse than this? He goes, yeah, you're a 5 on a scale of 1 to 10. I was a 5. I couldn't believe it. I thought I was definitely 11. I mean, my heart just hurt so bad. I went to him, and he helped put things in some perspective, and we did some work together. It was very helpful. But I'll tell you what was most helpful to me. I mean, when you feel like you're in a Charter Ridge commercial every day, to wake up and to have somebody coach you up made such a difference to me. My wife would tell me almost every single day, we need you to go to work, because we need you to provide for this family. And I didn't want to go. I just want to stay in bed. She said, Bailey and Natalie need you to be their dad, and I need you to be my husband, and we need you to go to work. And we love you, and you're going to be fine. And you know what I found was that when I went, even when I didn't feel like it, I pushed myself. I can remember putting the cruise control on New Circle Road, of all places, just so I could drive. And I would get here and I would work. And when I would help somebody, encourage somebody, or when I showed kindness to somebody who was going through a hard time, I found that in my soul, it was lifted a little bit. I didn't feel like doing that, but I did it partly because it was my job, but partly because that's what I was being coached to do. It's amazing how you choose to do the right thing, even though your life is hard, the remarkable things that God will do. Not just in the lives of other people, but in your heart and in your soul and in your mind. You actually start feeling a little bit better. And little by little, I made my way from where I was in that dark hole to where I am today. And I'm so thankful for that journey, because when someone comes into my office now whose heart is a 5 on a scale of 1 to 10 or worse, I get it. I get it a little bit. It's a choice on how you will respond. And James says, choose the attitude of joy. Choose the attitude of joy. Okay, there's a second question that survivors and spiritual conquerors always ask, so that they're healthy and they're holy in their response. And the second question is this: what must I do to make it through today? And it says, there's a one-word answer in the text. It's persevere. Persevere. Now, this is counter to the psychology of our modern culture that says, hey, there's some, self-help stuff you need to do. There's some formulas you need to follow. If you do a cleanse, or you get on these supplements, or you do all of these things, you're going to feel better about yourself. And some of those things help, but they don't solve the problem. Books, all that stuff. James says, let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. So I ran 3 marathons. I ran a half marathon. I did a lot of running 1 decade in my life, and I was running the Des Moines Marathon. I came up on this guy. He was in the United States Army. You could tell because he had the black shorts on, and he had the black and gold, Army logo on the front of his shirt. And he was ripped. I mean, he was one of those guys. He was a lot like me, but, it's very physical. What? Come on. I did not feel the love here. But I was actually going to pass him, and I noticed that he had a cramp in his one calf, and it was so knotted up that the entire calf muscle was up at almost right below the knee. I mean, if you've ever had a cramp like that, you know how painful it is. You cannot run. This guy was so amazing. I mean, he was just like running, barely running, but he was still moving along. And I came by and I went, hoo-ah, and he went, hoo-ah, and I was like, yeah. I just want to encourage. I don't even know what hoo-ah means, but I just wanted to encourage him. Don't quit. Don't quit. Whatever you do, because if you quit like that, you'll stop. You'll stop. Don't ever quit. In life, there's a lot of things that are going to happen. Don't ever quit. There's always a moment. There's always a moment. I saw on social media, this young girl had posted this thing. She said, some people think that suicide is an option. It's not an option that I would choose, but I guess it is an option. No, it's not. It's not. It's the worst decision that a person would ever make, because there's always hope. Do you know that God gives grace for the moment? What God asks us to do is, he says, just hold on. Just live this moment. And he'll give you the grace you need for it. And then, you know what? 10 minutes later, if you need more, he'll give it to you. His grace is, he provides it every day. And if you have a particularly bad day, guess what? He gives you additional grace. He doesn't want us to quit. He doesn't want us to give up. He doesn't want us to stop. He wants us to keep going. And I'm not saying that it's easy. I just want you to know it's doable. Now, how do we know this? Why is all this true? He says, because you know that the testing of your faith produces endurance. How do we know that? Well, the word that James uses there for know, he says that because you know means to know by way of experience. Knowing when you persevere through difficult times, something powerful happens in your life. Because of the personal experience, you know the testing and the purifying will work something in you that won't happen any other way. It's this endurance, this perseverance that's going to bring about the long-term good in your life. Let me illustrate this way. How many of you have had kids that needed braces? Anybody? put a few braces. Yeah, we had 2, right? And you know the drill. You go and they get the teeth ready. They may pull teeth. They put spacers in, all that kind of stuff. That's beautiful, isn't it? Isn't that a great picture? Hello. And, you know, their teeth are crazy, right? And then they put the bands on, and then it starts, right? You go every so often, then the orthodontist tightens it up. They do 2 things when you go. Tighten it up, and then you write them a check, right? Right, because it's painful for them, and it's painful for you financially. I mean, it costs something, doesn't it? Same is true in life. God allows things or brings things into our world that are like braces. They cost. There's some pain involved. There's certain parts of them at times that you absolutely hate. But what God is doing is he's making something beautiful in you. He's working in you to accomplish more than just straight teeth. He's creating something remarkable inside of you. You have an attitude, and you can decide how you want to deploy that attitude. You and I should have an attitude that the trial that we're facing, somehow, God in his sovereign goodness is going to do something in your situation, my situation. He's going to do it in you. He's going to do it through you. So don't quit. Whatever you do, whatever it takes, don't quit. Persevere. That brings us to question number 3. Question number 3. What hope do I have for tomorrow? What hope do I have for tomorrow? If somebody's in this room right now, and the law of averages tells us that there's probably several of you who are going through a broken world experience, and the feeling that you have right now is the weight that's on you. You just don't feel like you can stand up under it much longer. It's tearing you down, and you feel like, I just can't make it one more minute. God says that all you have to do, all that he wants you to do is endure today. Live this moment. Athletes will tell you that in training they go through these periods of time where they're tested, where it's very, very difficult, whether it's weight training, it's distance, whatever, aerobics, however, and it stretches them and it pulls them and it demands so much of them, and they endure and they endure and they endure, and then it's over. And then what happens? Later, they're stronger. They're faster. They can jump higher. Why? Because they went through that period of enduring the training. God will take the worst experiences in your life, and he will use them for the good of your life. He will use them for good in other people's lives. God's goal through this experience is to make you and I more like Jesus and demonstrate his grace to others in the process. He helps you to respond in ways that are supernatural. People will look at you and go, how is it that you don't hate your ex? How is it that you have such a good attitude about that company that fired you? How can you be so kind to her after what she did or what he did? How can you do that? And you'd like to give them this really, I'm such a spiritual superstar kind of answer, but you have to tell them the truth. I decided that I was going to put on a joyful attitude at a time when I didn't feel like being joyful. And through your experience, you learned that you have grace for today, and it helps you to handle what you're facing in the moment. And God will give you everything that you need. Everything that you need. This moment, the grace you need. God will take my worst, and he will use it for my best. Period. And then something will happen. You will look in the rearview mirror of your life, and you will look back a year or 2 years, and you will see the person that you were back then, and then you will compare it to the person you are now, and you will be blown away by the transformation that's taken place in your life. It's as though God took this piece of spiritual coal, and in the midst of the pressure of the broken world experience, you were squeezed and you were pressed and you were pulled and you were tormented, and yet you held on. You didn't quit. You stayed in there. You persevered. And then what happened? Little by little, he made you into this prolific, brilliant diamond that reflects the very character and the nature of Jesus Christ. And there were people whose lives were impacted because of that testimony. You will find that people who reflect on Jesus the most are often people who went through some of the most difficult challenges, broken world experiences of this life. They didn't give up. They didn't give in, though they wanted to on more than one occasion. There's a lot of times when we just want to say, I'm done, and throw the towel in. But they don't. And all they did was hang on for that day, and they allowed the perseverance to have its perfecting result in them. And they grew, and they matured, and they were transformed by the power of God. And that's God's agenda for you and for me. It's actually his plan for all of us. Whenever you have a broken world experience, look to God. Call on him. Ask these questions. What can I control? My attitude. How do I make it through today? Persevere. And third, what hope do I have for tomorrow? God will take my worst and use it for my best. And you know the reason all of this works? The reason that all of this is true is because he's right there with you in that moment. The reason that this transformation can happen is because God's at work. He's right there. He's doing it. No matter what the situation is in your life, no matter what it is, God's with you in it. Don't ever forget that.
There are days of taking more than I can give. There are choices that I've made that I wouldn't make again. I've had my share of laughter, tears, and troubled times. This has been the story of my life. And I have won, and I have lost. Got it right sometimes, but sometimes I did not. Life's been a journey. I've seen joy, I've seen regret. Oh, and you have been my God through all of it. You were there when it all came down on me. I was blinded by my fear, and I struggled to believe. In those unclear moments, you were the one keeping me strong. This is how my story's always gone. And I have won, and I have lost. I've got it right sometimes, but sometimes I did not. Life's been a journey. I've seen joy, I've seen regret. Oh, and you have been my God through all of it. And this is who you are, more constant than the stars up in the sky. All these years of our lives, I look back and I see you. Right now, I still do. Always going to. 'Cause I won, and I'm lost. I've got it right sometimes, but sometimes I did not. Life's been a journey. I've seen joy, I've seen regret. Oh, and you have been my God through all of it. Yes, you have been my God through all of it.
Dealing with a broken world experience, and I hope you know that nothing that I said today was intended to belittle or minimize what you're going through. I know that it's a challenge. I don't know what it is that you're facing, but I've had my mountains to climb at times, and I know that it's not easy, but I know that God makes it doable. He works by His grace through us. We're going to sing in just a minute, and if you'd just like somebody to pray with you, somebody who would just, you don't have to tell them what you're going through. You just want somebody to pray with you. I had a guy come at the end of first service, and he said, I said, what's going on? He said, the last 4 years has just been so hard. And I know a little of his story. So we pray. We're going to trust that God's grace will be enough for him today. Maybe, the first broken world experience that all of us have to deal with is that the issue of sin in our lives. And Jesus can repair that. If you've never taken that step to make him the Lord of your life, you want to talk to somebody, we're going to be in these back corners. We'd love to talk with you anytime between now and the end of the service. We'll stay as long as it takes. I want to encourage you. There's challenges in this life. Some of you are coming in here cruising and it's easy right now. It's okay. And I'm just so thankful that you're experiencing that joy. But know, whatever happens, God is always there. As Todd's saying, he's always, always there. Don't lose sight of that. Because when you and I look at it and we can't make sense out of it, we know he can. Let's stand together. Let's worship him. Come if you have any